Hello, friends. Thanks for tuning in. Great episode for you this week. Before I introduce the guest, as always, please follow, subscribe, rate, and review the show. It helps boost the podcast, grow the audience, and ultimately helps me create the best show for you guys. Additionally, please go follow me on social media, ROYBTZ on Instagram and ROY_BNTZ on Twitter. On Twitter, you can subscribe to the newsletter. And it gives you access to updates, occasional blog posts, news about the guest and the future of the show, and most importantly, just an easy way for you to get access to the podcast in your inbox every single week. Additionally, please consider supporting the podcast. This is an independent podcast. I made the decision not to work with any sponsors on this podcast as of right now, and I wanted to be completely independent. If you do love the podcast, if you do feel like you get value, please consider supporting the podcast. I appreciate it. Finally, if you want to start your own podcast, I have a full tutorial that covers everything you need to know, soup to nuts, A to Z, how to start, grow, execute, market, reach out to guests, really everything you need to know about podcasting, what system to use, services, everything. So feel free to check it out. That is in the show notes. On to the guests. This week I have Duncan French. Duncan is the Vice President of Performance at the Ultimate Fighting Championship, UFC, Performance Institute, the PI. He's got over 20 years of experience working with professional athletes, Olympic athletes, and he's just got a world of knowledge in the space. And he was kind enough to join the podcast. Now, if you've been listening to the podcast, you know that I'm a massive MMA fan, specifically UFC. And I always love to have someone from the UFC to kind of pull the curtain and get a little bit of a sneak peek behind how certain systems operate or function, just like what the broadcast team does or what they do in the PI, or how the fighters train, cardio that they have to do, everything, right? I love to learn about it and just gain as much knowledge on the topic as possible. So we covered a whole range of issues, everything from how the PI functions, how it helps athletes, the type of data that they've accumulated and collected over the past decade or so, what's the latest science. We talked about cold exposure. We talked about helping fighters with recovery, long-term effects of CTE, and a whole lot more. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Without further ado, let me introduce this week's guest, Duncan French. Enjoy the episode, everyone.
The Genuinely Interested Podcast.
Duncan, thank you for doing this. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
No problem. Appreciate it, Roy. Good to speak.
Yeah, man. Anyone who listens to this podcast knows that I am a massive martial arts, MMA fan, and specifically the UFC. I think in the past, this is off the top of my head if I had to guess, past 10 years, I might have missed a handful of events.
Well, good for you, man. On behalf of the UFC, thank you. thank you for your support.
Yes, I'm lining up Dana's pockets. I'm helping him in any way I can.
Know, right? And indirectly, you pay my salary, so keep it going.
I mean, it's just the best. I mean, to see the evolution of the UFC, the format, the way fighters have gone from kind of being not a joke, but maybe not taken seriously, to now being elite athletes, celebrities. It's amazing. And I've kind of like seen that whole trajectory over the past decade or so. So it's incredible to watch.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And, you know, to be part of it, you know, myself here at the Performance Institute, it's been great to be part of that evolution. But even before that, you know, there was a movement within the sport, and it continues to happen now. It's just, innovation and greater understanding of training science and, technical work and tactical techniques that people are implementing to win fights and things. You just see that like the whole sport is just evolving. And, for Dana's always said, it's going to be the most popular sport in the world. And, just the increase in fandom across the world, breaking into new territories, seeing all the different world champions that not only ourselves, but other promotions have got as well. Like combat sport now is on an upwards trajectory, which is really exciting to be part of for sure.
Yeah, never bet against Dana. Never bet against Dana.
For sure.
Yeah, he's been what do you call it? Dunks, or I don't know, like sports analogies or euphemisms as much, but he's been pretty much in the zone for the past decade or so, even more probably. So never bet against Dana. All right, let's talk a little bit about you for people who may not have picked up on the accent. Where did you grow up?
So I'm from the UK originally, from the north of England, and I was, in the UK, throughout my life. I did my, bachelor's studies in the UK, and then for my PhD, I came out to America in 2020. So 2000. A long time ago, quite a difference.
Long time.
Yeah. So, I came out to the States in 2000, 2004 for my PhD, and then I returned back to the UK. Dropped into the Olympic system in the UK, in Great Britain for a while, period of time in the English Premier League, and then came back. I always wanted to come back to America. I had a great time during my PhD studies, which were at the University of Connecticut at the time. It's always funny because I think about all these big NCAA schools, whether it's Baton Rouge or whether it's Madison, Wisconsin, or Florida State or whatever. Now I went to Ball State, Indiana. And then I transferred across to Connecticut, which is like a sleepy little dairy school, originally like an agricultural school, which is now grown. So my collegiate experience in America was not like the big college experience, but allowed me to get my head down. But even with that said, I had a great time when I was in the States, and I was keen to come back and potentially live here. So having been in the UK for 14, 15 years, I managed to secure a job at the University of Notre Dame. So I was at Notre Dame, heading up kind of performance sciences at Notre Dame Athletics immediately prior to coming to the UFC.
What was it? So you said you worked for the Premier League, the English Premier League. Was it for the league itself, or or a specific team?
Yeah, I was at Newcastle United.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, so they've actually just become the richest soccer club in the world, as you might have seen on the news. So,
oh no, I haven't. Why?
They've just been bought by the Saudi Arabian royal family.
There you go.
As Man City were bought by Abu Dhabi royal family, the Saudis have bought the Newcastle United club. So we'll see what happens in the future. And I think there's obviously big plans afoot. It's a club that's close to my heart. I'm a boyhood fan, and lived in Newcastle for a long time, and obviously was head of strength and conditioning for the team for a period of time as well. So we'll see. I'm excited.
It seems like all the Gulf families and oligarchs are kind of buying up all the English soccer teams.
Yeah, not only English soccer teams. I mean, if you look at the City Football Group for Manchester City, they've got Melbourne and New York FC, and they've got clubs in Belgium and Uruguay. So they're trying to create like a feeder pathway, like a pipeline, like a talent development pipeline by buying up other franchise clubs. Which is an interesting tactic, but certainly they've got the money to do it, right?
Oh yeah, they got endless money. What what were some of the differences that you saw, if any, between now, because now you've been with fighters for a long time.
Yeah.
What are the difference between maybe the football players that have maybe a little bit of a reputation of being prima donnas, maybe a little bit at times, from what I've heard, versus the fighters now that you deal with?
Yeah, no, and before coming to the UFC, I worked with taekwondo players, like Olympic taekwondo players with the Great Britain Olympic team, and boxers with the Great Britain boxing team for the Olympic Games and things. So I've been around a variety of combat sports, not just MMA. And you're right, every sport's got kind of a culture to it. And I've worked with basketball players; they've certainly got an approach, and okay, and then you've got soccer players, and like, okay, do you really want to? I think that what I would say is, combat athletes are just honest as the day is long, right? What you see is what you get, and that's what I love about this athlete population is that they're real, they're freaking real people, and that you take the rough with the smooth, because obviously the characters in the sport. But you always know what you're getting. And I think when I was working in the Premier League, obviously, I had great times there. I got great friends and things like that. But just their engagement and their commitment to, supplementary work outside of just playing football or soccer. Is the gym work really valuable? Is this injury prevention stuff really valuable? Am I out partying after the game? There's a lot of money in soccer right now, obviously, and that has an influence. But I just think combat athletes, because of what they have to go through and because of, it's hard to hide in the octagon when it's you and nobody else, right?
Yeah.
So you better have your shit together. Whereas on a soccer field, there's 10 other players that can potentially pick up the slack from your night out the night before. So I'm not saying that it's all that way, but definitely there's cultural differences.
Yeah, I think also in the gym you get humbled. I've never been part of a team per se. I've never done basketball or football or soccer or any other the sports team. So I don't know. I'm sure there's like an amazing camaraderie or maybe even like rivalry sometimes between the players. But when you're just there in the gym by yourself, getting humbled, getting whooped day after day, it humbles you. There's just no other way to look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen, I've been on the training field in soccer clubs where, people have been throwing haymakers and punches on the field. And, that gets pretty tasty because that's not the norm, right? It's like, crap, these guys are going at it. Whereas, when you're in a sport where every day is when grappling, wrestling, striking, sparring, whatever it may be, there's no hiding place. You know what I mean? And it's the rigors of the sport. And I think that's what makes these people, so so committed to the craft, in as much as you can't half-ass it. You know what I mean? Like you're either in and you're committed, or you're in the wrong game. Do you know what I mean? Because it's a tough world in combat sports to do what they do every single day. So kudos to these guys. But to be around them and to work with them and help them and support them, like it's great. Because as I say, like there's just the honest as the day is long, and I think that's in my world and kind of my area of expertise from a physical preparation standpoint, that's all you want. You want someone that's like engaged and someone that's going to go where they need to go, to some of those deep, dark places. So, you can use that to your benefit. And often it's, sometimes pulling the horses back, because these guys just, they've got the warrior spirit, right? They want to go, and it's a fight and everything's a fight in their life. Whereas, sometimes we've got to just manage that and pull the horses back a little bit, because, they'll run through a brick wall for you, which, like I say, the physical prep coach is all you want.
That's a dream come true, right? Because if you're in a team sport, you can, I don't want to say lazy, but you can get away maybe with certain things and other people will pick up the slack. And maybe some days you're a little lazy, or I don't know, you're out drinking the night before. But if you're a fighter, I'm the only one in the ring. I'm the or octagon. And then if I don't put in the work, if I don't find every singular advantage, whether it's the food I eat, the type of preparation, the best coaches, training maybe in elevation, I'm going to potentially lose, because it's a game of inches in there.
Oh, shit, yeah. I mean, you're looking for... And listen, coming back to team sports, things like rugby or football, some of these combative or collision sports, like, again, same mentality. We actually do a lot of collaboration with rugby clubs and American football teams, because, again, of that the rigors of what their sports require and what our fighters are doing. We're kind of coming together and just sharing ideas. But, yeah, I mean, in terms of combat athletes, you're absolutely right. Like, if you haven't got your shit together, and you walk into the octagon, you're going to get found out pretty quickly. And at the highest level, like that, it's just, unsustainable. So, we always talk about, making an athlete's strengths their super strengths, because, they're in the UFC and they're a world-class combat athlete because they do something really well. Whether it's grappling, striking, wrestling, whatever, they do something which is truly world class, and we want to obviously give them that competitive advantage by maximizing their potential to do whatever it is. Whether it's Israel Adesanya, striking at range and just movement and deception, or whether it's like Gilbert Burns, I don't know, and his jiu-jitsu and trying to take people down, like. Everyone's got an X factor. So what can we do to help them maximize that competitive advantage? But a lot of the conversation we have in the sport of mixed martial arts is, all right, how do you raise your limitations? Because your lowest hanging fruit is what your opponent is ultimately going to be going after, because that's going to take you into the deep water. So the thing about MMA is that it's got so many constituent parts to the fight that you've got to be at least at a level to survive and potentially compete to even have any success, let alone just rely on your X factors, which is going to be your true competitive advantage.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that. What was your trajectory to get to the UFC, to the PI? And then for people who may not know, what is the PI? Because we just take it for granted, but not everyone's a massive UFC fan. And then you are the VP, right? In the PI, in the Performance Institute in the UFC. And then I guess what is your role there? Kind of what do you do on the daily?
Yeah, so I'm the Vice President of Performance for the UFC Performance Institute, which essentially is the high performance service arm of the UFC. Yeah. UFC is a promotions company. It puts fights on all over the world, and it obviously draws in different fighters to come and compete on its promotion. The UFC in 2017 created a high performance training facility, which is the PI, as we call it, Performance Institute. And that's got services in sports medicine, sports nutrition, strength and conditioning, sports science, sports psychology, and a variety of other things which we continue to expand and support our fighter roster with. So, it's a resource service that our fighters can tap into at any moment in time. Now, we're a decentralized roster. We've got about 650 fighters around the globe. Mm-hmm. So the fighters can come and go to our facility here in Las Vegas. We have a sister facility in Shanghai, China, where we've also got about 30 kids in a full-time academy for talent development, trying to break some Chinese fighters into the UFC. And we're going to be opening up another PI in Mexico City here shortly, again, trying to build some resource in Latin America. And then, there are plans afoot to have other performance institutes at different territories around the globe so we can create this resource network that the fighters can tap into at any moment in time. So that's kind of what I manage, direct, and coordinate the team here to help align our services to meet the needs of whatever they may be for the fighters. And that can be anything from, coming in for 2 days just to get some information around body composition because a fighter might be, struggling making weight, through to, a 3-week stint where they're doing a ton of diagnostics and information and training with us, through to 8 to 10 week training camps, fight camps, through to blow my ACL out. I'm going to move to Vegas for 9 months and then get all my post-surgical rehab done for free at the PI. So we see all sorts of different service provision strategies, and I think it's very much an a la carte kind of custom and bespoke approach to service provision. But my background is, I'm a Ph.D. in exercise physiology, so I'm kind of a sports scientist by trade. But for the majority of my career, I've been a strength and conditioning coach with professional or Olympic athletes. Mm-hmm. Very much grounded in the Olympic movement. I was 14 years with what's called the English Institute of Sport, which services a variety of Olympic programs in the UK. I think last time I counted, I've worked with 37 different pro or Olympic sports at the most elite level. So, I've worked with Olympic gold medalists, world record holders, and world champions and things. So, I've had a really cool career. And then, as I say, I've transitioned from being a coach and a sports scientist into now more, management and strategy and performance planning, and how do we kind of work to optimize, performance services to meet athletes' needs.
How many UFC fighters would you say use you guys?
So we work with about 83% of the roster. The thing about the Performance Institute, right, which you got to understand is that, whether it's Manchester United Soccer Club or the New York Yankees baseball team or whatever, those professional teams own the rights to their players, right? So they can mandate what they do at any moment in time in terms of their contract, right? I own whoever it may be, Aaron Judge. So I'm going to tell him what to do, when he's going to come for breakfast, when training is, or what the expectations are. All the UFC fighters are independent contractors. So we can't mandate their usage of the Performance Institute. So it's always at their choice of when and how they kind of interact with us. But we work with about 83% of the roster. On a month-to-month basis, we work with about 220 UFC fighters on direct programming of some nature, be that medical, S&C, or nutrition, or sports science, whatever it may be.
So about a third of the fighters.
Correct, yeah. And obviously that rotates. But if you think about, we have services here in Las Vegas, but we also go to every single event. There's 43 UFC events a year, and we're providing medical and nutrition and culinary cooking services at those events as well. So we're interacting with 24 to 30 fighters every single weekend on the fight cards. And then we also have, interactions here at the Performance Institute. So yeah, it's a pretty involved operation we've got with lots of moving parts.
Wow. So if they're in Jacksonville or Scotland or wherever they're going, there's a whole team of nutritionists, I don't know, physical, whatever it is, they're all going with the fighters or with the team.
With the event, you mean, the fights?
Yeah. So when you have when you're having a fight that's not in Vegas but abroad or other side of the country, there's a whole team of people. Yeah.
So we send 2 dietitians, 2 performance chefs, and a physical therapist to every single event. So that means that the fighters that are on that fight card, I mean, the most important interaction that we have at events is helping the fighters or supporting the fighters make weight. And that's there's a financial implication against that, right? So we do that by providing all the meals and breakfast, lunch, dinner, any snacks, and then any refueling after being on the scales. So we have 2 chefs that are every single event cooking and preparing the food. We have 2 dietitians that are obviously helping the teams, the athlete and their respective teams, their corners, coaching them through, the most optimal way to make weight and doing the weight tracking and things like that. And then we also have a sports medicine professional on site to help doing any last minute treatments that potentially could influence an athlete making the octagon, removing any niggles or issues that could be influential to the outcome. So yeah, we have a bit of a schizophrenic operation because kind of half our team goes on the road and is traveling around the world, and then we rotate our staff, and then the rest of us are based here in Vegas.
No, it's a well-oiled machine. I look at the at Fight Week every time, and it just seems like every little detail is thought out, planned, executed. It just seems like it's a perfectly well-oiled machine. At least that's what it seems like. I don't know what happens behind the scenes, but that's what it looks like.
I mean, I think, I appreciate you saying that because obviously it's like a duck on water, right?
Yeah.
you see the duck going across the top, but underneath these legs are going like 100 miles an hour. I think that's what fight weeks are like, right? And any fighter, any coach, anyone that's worked with combat athletes, there's a lot of unforeseen circumstances that happen through fight week. So sometimes it's very proactive in terms of planning and support, and other times it's very reactive. And that makes it emotionally exhausting for the fighters, for their coaches, and for ourselves as support staff, in terms of, the concern and the worry and the physical status of the fighter is obviously what is our most primary concern. So, we want to do that to the best of our abilities. But, I think we've developed a good system that the athletes are engaging with and see the benefit of. And, we obviously want to continue to grow and develop how we do that.
Yeah. I've always wondered, what's the revenue model? What's the business model of the PI? Because the UFC is not a nonprofit. It is in it for making money. And I just never understood what the revenue model is.
Yeah, it's a great question. And for total transparency, all the services and the food that we provide are free of charge to any of our 650 rosters. So that is a cost that is absorbed by the UFC. Now, the reason why they do that is essentially asset management, right? Prior to the Performance Institute, one of the reasons for its inception is that the UFC was losing kind of revenue or money with athletes dropping off fight cards. And if that's a world championship fight, that can be multi-million dollars of revenue that's lost because, someone injures themselves 2 weeks before a fight, or, someone doesn't make weight and, the championship bout might drop off or whatever it may be. So that's kind of how the UFC looks at it, is that we're providing this resource, this service, but it's just indirectly, it's asset management in terms of protecting and supporting the fighters, get to the octagon where then, in the 20,000 seater arena and the pay-per-views and things, everyone gets to watch their favorite fighters and people are obviously going to pay to support that. So, I give credit when I came to the job, I give credit to the UFC for having a pretty forward-looking kind of mentality of doing that. But yeah, all the services are free of charge. They're all the costs are all absorbed. Fighters essentially have to, get themselves to Vegas and accommodate themselves, but everything else is taken care of.
Wow, that's great. So there's no direct revenue that the PI is making from, I don't know, outsourcing the facility or the expertise that you guys have, or data or anything, to any other, maybe organizations.
So we have
athletes.
we have a little paid model. So facility rentals for other third parties that might want to host workshops and things in a world class training center. We do rent out some of the facilities.
But that's chump change.
Yeah, I mean, based on knowing what my annual operating budget is versus what we get from that. Yeah, it's a fair change. And then we have a little paid model for other pro athletes. So we get a lot of inbound requests from footballers or Olympians or baseball players or basketball players that want to come and spend time at the PI because they've seen what our facilities and our resources look like, and they want a piece of it in their off season or whatever it may be. So again, we're the high performance advisors to the Chinese Olympic team. So right now I'm in communications with, China sending some of their Olympic teams to come and do training camps with us in Vegas. And obviously there's a cost against that. So it doesn't make us net neutral in terms of the cost. We're still a cost center rather than a profit center. But that's kind of how we operate. Anything for UFC fighters is absorbed by the company. And then we try to earn, a little bit of money where and how we can through other services.
Do you guys have data to, proving the effectiveness of the PI? Like, so let's say prior to the PI, X amount of fighters were not showing up to fights or not making weight. And then after the PI, what changed as far as statistics?
Yeah, of course. I mean, again, another great question, right? Because we work with the whole roster. All right. So we're not like a normal sports team that's judged on wins and losses, because we'll only ever bat 500, right? Because we're essentially might be working with both fighters that are in the octagon fighting each other. So it's like we're never going to put our objectives position against wins and losses. So we look to other creative ways to say, how impactful are we being on the athlete community? Obvious things like missed weights. When we opened up, I think it was 4.9% of all weigh-ins were a missed weight. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, but the optic of a missed weight and then the financials against it can be quite large. But that's dropped down to 2.4%.
Oh, wow.
In just about 5 years. So again, we've kind of halved the number of missed weights, and that continues to go down. We look at the speed of return to play, expediting rehabilitation. If someone didn't have the standard of medical care that they can now get, how long was it taking them to get back in the octagon and fight again versus what we do now. And then also kind of utilization, which you touched on previously, just engagement. Like we honestly believe that if we can have an engagement, be it at the event, be it remotely, wherever they are in the world, or be it here in Las Vegas, that by integrating and engaging with our services, we're going to be improving their awareness of performance, professionalism and performance services, and how it can help their health, well-being, and performance. So, we look at utilization rates as a real KPI for the Performance Institute. We want to see that number continue to get as high as we can from an engagement perspective, so that those resources are being utilized by the athletes, and consequently the probability of success is going to increase. We talk about, if we can increase someone's interaction, their likelihood or their probability of being successful is going to go up against someone that doesn't utilize performance services, be that ourselves or be that anywhere else. That's going to have an impact on the outcome of your performance.
Yeah. You mentioned weight cuts earlier, and it's a little controversial, I guess, but I'm interested in not, I guess, how much people cut, because they can do whatever they want. And we've seen that for the most part, when they do extreme cuts, it's not good. Like when they go, a whole weight division down, or sometimes even two, it never pans out for them. It's just, there's so much involved in just drying out yourself that much that it's just, but sometimes it's good. Sometimes someone does go a division down, and, it pays dividends for them. But like, is there actual data that you guys can provide to athletes telling them like, hey, this is actually maybe not your best division? Let's say, I don't know, someone's true 170 and he wants to fight at 55 or 185 or whatever it is, right? Like you have data that you can tell athletes, like this is where you should be. You should not be cutting down. When you do cut down, XYZ happens, all that stuff.
Yeah, so there's a couple of questions in there, I think, right?
Yeah, there's a few. Yeah. Sorry.
No, it's good.
I was just going on a tangent.
No, man, it's great stuff because, again, that comes back to like the whole mission and mandate of what we do here. You know, one of the things which we are blessed with is our ability to aggregate information from our whole roster as we interact with them. Now, data security and data privacy is our number one priority for what we do. But we are in a privileged position where we can aggregate data and look at population norms. So we can look at distribution curves, all right? And we can really start to understand, all right, what does the 170 weight class look like? How much lean muscle mass do they have? How much fat mass do they normally carry? What do they do when they're off camp? And what do they do when they go into a weigh-in? You know, like we can really start to get a lot of information. And that allows us to do exactly what you talked about. If an athlete is a tweener, or he's between two weight classes and doesn't know whether to go up or down, or an athlete is, not had much success in a weight class and potentially thinks that they would be better at a weight class lower down where there could be a bigger body, then we've got all the information, all the data to give them the insights to help them make that decision. Now, we're not going to be the ones that say, oh, yeah, you should absolutely drop down to 155. You're too small for the 170s. But we will be able to tell them how hard that's going to be based on their body composition. And we can also look at all the performance data from the 170 weight class and the 155 weight class and say, actually, the power outputs and the strength and the energy systems that you're generating at right now are comparative to this weight class or this weight class, whatever it may be. Usually it's going up, right? Someone's struggling to make a weight class and they need to go up. We can say, well, your power is not changing. You're still above average for the weight class above as well. So you're in a good place. Or actually, your strength levels are super low compared to the weight class above. Either you make the move and we need to really jump on a comprehensive strength training program, or you make the decision that you don't think that's going to be too big a factor and you make the jump and we've given you that background information. So that's kind of what the power, I think, of what one of the things we do is have those conversations. And sometimes, fighters are directed to us via the matchmakers or even Dana to say, hey, go to the PI and get your data and your metrics evaluated. Yeah. And then you can be in a better position to understand which weight class is more natural for you. And we've created, some algorithms and things to help us give that information to the fighters based on lean body tissue, fat mass, history of weigh-ins. What do you normally weigh in at? What do you normally report and check in at versus, making the cut to a particular weight class. So all that information we've been able to aggregate over the last 5 years. Passing on to the next question, which is, I think the optic of making weight is part and parcel of our sport. Right? We're a weight class sport. Yeah. Now, one of the things which we've been able to do in the last 5 years is aggregate a lot of information, a lot of data, and also get the scientific background to coach or support these teams and these athletes on what your body goes through during a weight cut and how best to do that. There's an optimal way to make weight, and then there's a number of less than optimal ways to make weight, right? So it's always a conversation with the coach, with the corner, and with the fighter to say, what's your preferred method. And again, we're there in a resource and a support infrastructure, but we've got a lot of evidence now to show what's the best mechanism for you to make weight appropriately and then rebound in a way that will, again, on Saturday evening, put you in the best physical status and cognitive status to help you fight. So, we've got to a point where we request that athletes report about 8 to 10% above their official weight. Okay. Because we know based on, compartmental parts of the body, be it the gut, be it, water that's held in muscle, be it, general whole body hydration. We know that we can pull a certain amount of water from, these 3 different domains within the body that will allow the athlete to do this acute cut in an optimal fashion from about 8% and then rebound to no more than 10%. And remember, the whole point of a weight class sport is to try and get parity in the sport.
Mm-hmm.
You want people that are fighting each other to be of the similar weight. So, we think 10%, delta either above or below is appropriate. Anything beyond that, now you start to see people gaming the system, and that's the whole point of why people try and make big cuts, right?
Yep.
But again, we've got a good amount of evidence to coach fighters through what we think is the best way to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen fighters posts on the night of or the day after the weigh-in, 20 pounds more than they weighed in 155. Now they're like 170 something. Like, Jesus Christ, that's
yeah. I mean,
it's extreme.
It's
because you go down so much and then you balloon back up, and that's just like that's a lot of work for the body to do. Like cut down, I don't know how much, 20 pounds in a couple of days, right?
Yeah.
Balloon back up another 20 in less than 24 hours, and then you have to go fight the biggest fight that next day. Like, Jesus, that's a lot to go through.
Yeah, there's no other sports that like position themselves in a you're absolutely right. Like what the athletes have to do prior to going into an octagon and performing optimally, which is not just like playing badminton or ping pong or like swimming. It's a fist fight, right? So you would want to be optimized for that. What these fighters do, 20 to 30 hours immediately prior to that is pretty significant, and no other sport does that, right? It's not like you're going on a soccer match and you're restricting your calories for the 4 days before it. Your sleep is all disrupted. You're not drinking, water and things. So, and it's very nuanced to what combat sports are, and that's why the public optic of like these washed out fighters on the scales or people fainting and things is what we need to remove from the sport, because that's malpractice. That's guys and girls not doing it in the most effective fashion. Mm-hmm. And that's what the Performance Institute's trying to do, is just move the narrative a little bit, bring science, data, insight, and understanding is to, you can make weight in a weight class sport by dropping your body, by dropping your body weight through some tactics and techniques. But it needs to be done in an effective way. Otherwise, you're going to compromise yourself going into competition. And like MMA is a sport of consequences, right? It's not like you just lose the fight. You lose a race, or you miss the shot on a tennis court, or you don't hold a putt. Like, no, you're getting knocked out, and there's going to be a physical attrition to that. So that's, I think, where we're at now in terms of trying to support the whole global community. It's not just the UFC roster, but the UFC trying to lead the narrative of like what's the best way to go about this practice for amateur combat athletes that potentially move into pro ranks and beyond. Because again, it's about health, well-being, and performance of everybody that enjoys doing combat sports.
Yeah, I remember there was a video a few years back of Darren Till cutting weight. And it was hard to watch. Like, I remember the guy literally crawling out the sauna, could barely get up to even, there you go. Could barely get up to even like, his coach was holding pads. He was like, all right, let's keep punching. Couldn't do it. The guy was dying. And I was like, there's absolutely, and I think, I forget which fight this was, but I actually do believe he ended up losing that fight, because there's no way in a few days you're going to be able to be your optimal self. And I was wondering about just someone that kind of recently became really famous in the UFC, Paddy Pimblett, and cuts a lot of weight. 2 weeks later, this guy balloons back up. Right, like just like cheeks all full, like eating Oreos all day, just fatty. And I was just wondering, like, is that sustainable long term to just balloon cut throughout your whole career? There's got to be like, I don't know, a drop point, right? Like your body's just not going to be able to sustain that.
Yeah. So again, it's the whole purpose of why the Performance Institute was put into place, right? I mean, I always talk about a 52-week fight camp. right? Fight camps are normally 8 weeks in duration, and within combat sports, there's kind of this whole default to 8 weeks, like they're working 8-week cycles. It's an 8-week fight camp, 8-week this, 8-week that. Well, there's money in the sport now, and also not you remove the money, just athlete longevity. You have to be a professional all year round, i.e., the 52-week fight camp.
Yeah.
And you have to consider the consequences of what it does to your metabolism, as what you're talking about, and metabolic injury is a real true thing that we deal with, of gorging and letting yourself go, and then starving and restricting on a cyclical basis. That can be very disruptive to metabolism, hormonal and endocrine profiles, a lot of different factors within your body. So. Again, that comes back to what our messaging is to the community. But because they're independent contractors, we're giving advice. So it's on them to choose how they want to go about it. But you make weight until you don't make weight. All right, and that's the first time you miss weight. I've never missed weight. I'll balloon up. I've never missed weight. Well, until the one time when you do miss weight and then you lose money. Or until something becomes a physiological or biological issue that is now leading to potentially a higher incidence of injury or niggling injuries that won't heal, or other factors that are related to how your performance behaviors are conducted throughout the year. So again, I think that's just one of the great things about combat sport, and again, like fight sports, like the UFC, it's true prize fighting, right? And there's the old schoolers like Cowboy Cerrone and things like that have gone into bars and said, yeah, I'm going to fight this guy, I'm rocking up and I'm going to earn money, and it's true prize fighting. Like that whole kind of romance of like the prize fight is still within the sport. But what we're now starting to figure out and find is that being more professional in a year-round perspective, and I'm not knocking Cowboy or anybody because he's really engaged with what we do now as well, but having a different mentality of like trying to be consistent, it's going to give you career longevity, which is always hard to see as an athlete because they're living there now. Like if I do something now, it's hard for me to tangibly to think that that's going to add 3 years onto my career, but the potential is, right? And that's more earning capacity. So I think we're trying to professionalize the whole thing. And we're trying to remove some of these bad practices where people are ballooning up and then cutting and ballooning up on this big roller coaster of physiological change.
Is there something like, for example, the Diaz brothers, right? Like super famous for their cardio, right?
Yeah.
The Ironman, triathlons, all that stuff. And then you have other fighters, without naming names, that are not known for their cardio. In fact, they're known for gassing out 2-3 rounds in. Super strong though, right? Like usually they're like, one touch, they'll put you down, but just cardio-wise, they don't have it. I think you touched upon it earlier about like highlighting their strengths. But is there a way to get someone that just historically usually gasses out during fights and get him to a Tony Ferguson or a Colby Covington or a Diaz brother level of cardio? Is that possible?
I mean, of course it's possible, but there's a time commitment to that, right? And a training strategy that needs to be progressive in nature and somewhat chronic in nature across time. It's not something that we can do in an 8-week fight camp, is take you from, a certain energy system preference and totally flip your energy systems over to a different approach. Like that's not happening in that amount of time.
Yeah.
What I will say is that in our sport, a lot of fighters come to us with stylistic background preferences, right? So Colby Covington's a wrestler, like he's got a great cardio because of what wrestling throughout high school and college gave him, you know what I mean? And we see that with a lot of our athletes, that they come with stylistic preferences. And now we actually can bucket the different fight styles and say, well, we know if you're a Sambo player coming out of Russia or whatever, you're going to have certain characteristics. If you're a kickboxer, you're going to have very different characteristics. If you're a wrestler, different again, right? So now we're starting to already differentiate between what someone's going to come to the party with based on what fight style their preference is. Mm-hmm. But yes, then it comes down to that normal distribution of our data again to say, hey, listen, you're in the below average to poor range for aerobic fitness, you know what I mean? And then we've got Nick Diaz over here and Paul Felder, like they're on the super like gold standard side. So like, are you okay sitting at this end of the curve, or do you want to move towards this end of the curve? Because then we can help and support you with that programming. And yeah, like nudging physiology is training science, right? How you take physiology and adapt it through different training interventions. Again, comes back to the whole narrative of professionalizing combat sport, which has always been pretty spit and sawdust, right? It's like, I'm just going to go in there, I'm going to fight.
Yeah.
Now I say that because, listen, we've got some athletes that don't want to pick up a weight and don't want to like live. Like, you know, I know I won't mind me saying it, like Bobby Green, like he's on a tear at the minute. Mm-hmm. Bobby's not a big weightlift. Like he doesn't want to pick up a lot of weights. Like he's all about speed and movement and very boxing traditional background. And that works for him, right? So we're in the conversation about like, when do we try and help Bobby, and when does he want us to leave? When does he want us to leave him alone? But also like, what's the type of style of training does he want? Is it more body weight? Is it more kind of parkour and gymnastics, or is it like, are we picking up weights and throwing them above our head, which some people are desperate to do? You know, maybe they come from more of a wrestling background or whatever it may be. So for each athlete, you got to find what works for them as well. So it's not one size fits all. You know, here's the gold standard training program for an MMA fighter. Obviously, we've got kind of awareness of what that kind of average approach looks like, but then you kind of just flexing it and pivoting it based on personal preferences. Number one, are they going to do this training? Because if they don't want to do the training, their engagement in it is going to be zero and it's going to be useless. You can write the world's best training program, but if Bobby Green doesn't want to pick up a weight, it's pretty irrelevant. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So we're always kind of saying, we come back to an N of one. Like every athlete that we work with is a physiological organism that is very different to the next person. So if we give them all the same program, it's not going to have the same results. So
so there's not like a set template that you guys use for all UFC fighters. You customize it to each and every one based on whatever it is that whatever their needs are. Is that true also? Sorry, just have a quick question. Is that true for, I mean, it has to be, right, for nutrition as well? I remember when there was a period I was doing a lot of like mountaineering, and I remember one of the guides told me, and this happened to be so true, I actually didn't end up eating while I was up on the mountain, but he said, like, whatever it is that you're coming up on the mountain with, the food that you're bringing, make sure you love it down at like sea level. Because if you don't like it at sea level, you're going to absolutely hate it up top. And I don't know what it is about the elevation, but I literally couldn't eat the food. It was disgusting. I ended up actually not eating for like the whole night. And I wonder if it's the same, right? Like they have to be on a certain regimen, a certain diet, but if they don't like the food, they're not going to eat it. Like you have to optimize it for them so that they like it and that it serves their caloric needs, right?
Yeah. I mean, listen, at the start of the whole conversation, we're dealing with human beings, right?
Yeah.
The fascinating thing about humans is that we have personal choices and preferences, and you've nailed it, right? At the end of the day, it's about compliance to a strength training program, compliance to a fitness program, compliance to a feeding or a diet program. Like what the most recovery, the most successful thing is the one that someone's going to be most compliant to, right, and engage with. That starts right up here in someone's mind, and we have to be cognizant of that. And I think, you know, that's often, you know, like I said, I've been in this game a long time. People, you know, in the world of strength and conditioning or whatever, people give a program to an athlete, not really understanding like if there's exercise selection in there that is against their kind of preferences, you know. So what's leading the dance? Is the athlete leading the dance, or is the program leading the dance? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you need a blend of both. But yeah, it starts with like having a conversation. Like you got to find out, you know, do you like eating eggs? Because, you know, we're going to remove a lot of vegetables and you're going to be eating a lot of program. I don't like eggs. Well, holy shit. Well, why are we programming eggs in someone's diet? And that's a really stupid example, right? But that's the reality of it is, yes, you've got to get inside their preferences to begin with. But then, all right, it's a discussion around, all right, we have to restrict, you know, food group X because that's going to be impactful on your physiology, and we're trying to make your fat mass reduce across time. So we've got to remove it from your diet. Are you cool with that? Then you're into the conversation of, you know, how can you stimulate the brain of a human being to remove it and then feel like they're getting reward from that food as well. Because again, food is a very visceral thing for people.
Sure.
It's something that has to be managed very closely because it's such a personal thing, Same with training, but not potentially to the same extent. So all the time, we're having the conversation. Like I say, N of one, we look at there's no cookie cutter programming in the UFC PI. We write every program from scratch for every single athlete because their physiology is different, their psychology is different, their social and emotional state is different, their home life is different. If you're living with your wife and she can cook, or if you're living alone and you can't be bothered to cook, what's your preference going to be? If you're working 2 jobs as well as being a UFC fighter, what you're doing, so there's so many other variables that come into it that you need to consider. Sure. It's not just a matter of saying, here's gold standard program to take some from this weight to this weight.
Yeah.
It's not as simple as that. If you're going to do it optimally. Now you can grab a program and say, all right, I'm going to follow this. And of course it's going to have an effect. But we always say, we're in the top echelons of trying to make optimal change to make world champions. So a generic program is probably not going to get you to the point that you want to be a world champion. It needs to become more specific to your physiological needs.
Yeah, 100%. Do you guys look at long-term effects of head trauma?
Yeah.
Or is there preventative work or treatment that you offer or are even available other than obviously getting hit in the head, which you can't, there's no way to get around that. Or is all that post-fighting career?
No. So again, listen, you're hitting on all the major topics, which is fantastic because ultimately, we're in a combat sport, right? Yeah. And we're not hiding them from the fact that athletes are going to get hit in the head and part of the objective of our sport is to knock somebody out, right?
Because some sports do try, like and the NFL, right? There was a whole controversy, like they were trying to hide the fact that what did you call it when you get the head trauma?
TBI or CTE?
CTE, yeah. They were trying to hide the fact. The UFC is not trying to hide the fact. You can't hide the fact. Like this is a prize fighting.
So it's a combat sport, and within the parameters of knowing it's a combat sport, we're still trying to make it as safe as possible for our competitors, right? So, whether that's laws and regulations, whether that's anti-doping, which obviously we've got a big position stand on anti-doping in the UFC that not all promotions do have. You're talking about athlete health in the octagon there. We're looking at equipment development with some of our partners on how we're changing the equipment to promote better fights or longevity of fighters. We are the primary donor to the Cleveland Clinic athlete brain health study, which is now in its 9th year of funding from the UFC. And we've put millions of dollars into that research to look at not only current fighters, but also fighters after they retire, to look at brain imaging and what happens to their brains during their retirement, and does it change across time, and how can we support our insights and awareness of that, whether it's looking at instrumented mouthpieces where we can look at the number of impacts and brain, the nature of the impacts that an athlete's getting, to look at using technology and data to track this across time, like nutrition interventions, things that we can pull inflammation out of the brain and we can get energy to the brain after sparring or after a fight that will expedite the recovery of the brain. So, we've got a ton of different verticals around brain health that, again, we're trying to really gain a lot of insight and information on to support the fighters.
Is THC something you guys work with, or is that not allowed still because it's federally legal?
Yeah, not THC, but CBD. We obviously do. We've been looking into CBD as which is part of the marijuana plant extract, and the pain relief and inflammation relief components of that. Dana was looking into potentially working with some academic partners on psilocybin. Which is
that's Joe Rogan,
yeah. So again, nothing's off the table. Some of it is easier to do than other things based on FDA clearance and things like that. But again, I say that because the UFC is cognizant that, all right, we want to look after our athletes even when they're not with the promotion. There's an obligation to see how they can continue to live their healthiest life, their best life. So
yeah. I had Kenny Florian on the podcast, and he was talking about how martial arts is 60% mental, 40% physical, or roughly around those numbers, right? And
funny because Forrest Griffin, who works for us, says I think he said it's 90% mental, apart from the 60% that's physical.
That's a much better line. I might have to steal that one. But do you guys, so I remember, I've been training Muay Thai many years. And I remember I had a friend at the gym back home, absolute savage, assassin. Like this guy was like this Ukrainian guy. Love him. He's like a really good friend, but just he would decimate everyone in the gym. Right. And my coach would always tell him, like, go fight. Like, I'll put you in fights. Never wanted to do fights. And I would ask him, like, why not? He was like, I can't. Like, I'm not going to be able to sleep for weeks. Mentally, I get nervous. I get hives. But in the gym, assassin. Right.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, like, do you guys work with fighters on the mental aspect as well? I don't know if that's, pertains to what you do specifically, but within the PI, is that something you guys do?
It is. We didn't open up, when we opened up in May of 2017, we didn't have sports psychology as part of our service portfolio. Became pretty aware pretty quickly that was a need. And we've since added psychology as a service that we provide to the fighters through the UFC PI as well. Now, again, sports psychology has many different parameters to it. For some people, it's just like a performance lifestyle. Like I can't get my training structure managed and I'm just exhausted. And other people, it's like, I can't walk out in front of 20,000 people in an arena. And other people, it's like, well, between rounds, I'm having a great round and then I can't reset my mind during rounds. So it comes in many different facets. But yeah, we offer that to the fighters through the PI, and the utilization of that again has been an upward trajectory in terms of like fighters starting to really see the benefit of the mental side of the game. Because I think we've the coach before the PI and long after we're gone, people are understanding how to fight, right? So we're not bold enough to tell people, the fighters and the coaches that, we're telling them how to do their jobs. That they're figuring out this sport all the time. It's a sport of evolution, is MMA, always new techniques, look at low leg kicks and things.
Low leg kicks.
Into the sport, right? Like just change the sport completely. So they're really innovative. But, the physical side, I think, has been pretty well established. But the addition of mental techniques, you can't just say, oh, well, be tough. Like you're a fighter, you should have grit. Of course, you've got to have that, right? Like I'm not saying you shouldn't have it. That, that mentality is a given. But, using certain techniques and tactics that, you train in your brain in the same way you train your body is kind of the next forefront or the next frontier in sport, I think, not just in MMA. But harnessing the capabilities of the brain is going to evolve all sports to the next level through, micro analyzers and micro monitoring and data and things like that. So we've brought psychology online because we've seen the need in our clientele, and it's only going to get more and more involved in what we do.
Before we wrap up, I want to ask you about something, because I love doing this and I've done this a bunch of times and I feel like it helps, but I don't know if it helps. Like I don't have actual science behind it. Yeah. Cold exposure for recovery. Is it settled science or is it placebo or is it where is it on the scale of this actually works?
It's absolutely, there's more and more data now coming out, whether it's Wim Hof or, the Huberman Lab. Andrew Huberman's got a great podcast. He just did one with Andy Galpin. Andy made reference to it. I've been on that. I've made reference to it. There's a lot of data in terms of what cold exposure can do in terms of immune system and regeneration of cells and, a variety of different things. So, it's absolutely something that has been, again, great example of not evidence-based practice, but practice-based knowledge, right? So people were jumping in, like up in Finland or Scandinavia or Russia, whatever, jumping into frozen lakes and saying, "Oh, I feel great," and then you jump in. So like they were people just playing around with it. I'm not sure they had like great science to support why it was working, but they kept doing it and it made them feel fantastic, and they were living longer. And now People are starting to put data and science against that. So yeah, cold exposure is very much now a real strategy, not only for performance, but just longevity and lifestyle and well-being for sure.
Saunas is something they also do a lot in Finland, which is not very popular here in the US for some reason. They have like more saunas than people, I think, in Finland.
Yeah, it's a culture thing, like just sitting in the sauna and whacking yourself with a brand. I'm not sure. Yeah, Americans and the Brits certainly don't do that as much as Russians and Finnish.
No, we're not ready for it. Duncan, this was illuminating. Thank you so much for doing this today.
No, thanks, Roy. Appreciate it. And good luck with the rest of the podcast. And thanks for the time, man.
Appreciate it. Where are the best places to find you? Where can people find you on the internet?
I'm on most social channels, whether it's Twitter or Instagram. I'm just Dr. French, I think. So yeah, reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn if you need me, whatever. But happy to chat.
All right. This was awesome. Thanks again, man.
All right. See you.
Take care.